All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get started. Aaron, can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Morrell present, Representative Hilferty present, Senator Harris present, Councilman Thomas present, Councilman DeRusso is around, Renee Gonzalez present, Gray Lewis present. We have a quorum.
All right. With that, we will go to the agenda. Firstly, the approval of minutes from our August 31st, 2022 meeting and our October 26th, 22 meeting. Councilman Thomas moves to approve. Councilman DeRusso seconds. Please vote your machines. All right.
Am I voting?
Does everybody have their people are still logging in? Yeah, you just gotta log in as sign in. There you go. All right, 6 yeas, no nays. Both sets of minutes are approved. First up, we have the ordinance number 34113, the sewage and water board billing ordinance. Aaron, can you go over it for us?
Councilmember, did you want to do the presentation first?
We can do the presentation. I mean, you can do the presentation.
It's not my presentation. It's the Sewage and Water Board.
Okay.
presentation.
I don't know who was doing the presentation. All right, sewage and water presentation. Let's go. Oh, wait, you know what it is on the, okay, I'm sorry. I read the agenda. I inverted the agenda. I'm sorry. So first up, we have the sewage or multifamily unit water shutoff strategy. Councilman Thomas, you have a question on the strategy?
I just want to have a comment after the, maybe before the presentation. I'm on a panel for DB discussions and participation for Entrepreneur Week. So I'll wait until their presentation and then give my comments, please.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I think y'all can do that from up here. So.
Yeah.
If you'd like.
Hi, Gray Lewis, Sewage and Water Board. Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity. Just wanted to provide some information following up on Ghassan's last meeting here a couple of weeks ago. We showed this slide and definitely past due balances are continue to be an issue. And within that are multi-family accounts that have not paid, have arrearages. And here on the next page, what we're talking about is a specific strategy to target those. And it's really a work that we've been doing. I developed a CFO call list for certain accounts and owners and property managers that have received notices, collection, several notices, but have not responded. So the strategy here is dictated to garner a response in these situations where we've reached out multiple times. We have very large balances, so we're strategic in the approach. You know, this is a last resort type of approach. We know it causes lots of problems for the multiple people involved in the structure of the accounts is complex because we have typically a property manager responsible for paying bills. We have an owner. Commonly, these are out-of-state entities, and we have local tenants, you know, that are affected as users. So our concern, you know, is to only do this as a matter of last resort, but in situations where months and years have passed by, in some cases without a response to our formal delinquent letters and notices and calls are occurring on a monthly basis, no one's returning our call. We have to do a turnoff process, and within that is a formal notice that would be posted in common areas, which is shown on the left there, to make sure that all tenants and users have that information that the owner has been receiving. And within that, I was going to let Renee, you know, explain on the next page sort of some of the steps involved and additional information that users are going to receive.
Thank you, Ray. So in front of you or on this slide, we have the multi-unit shut-off policy. This is not a new policy. So just for clarification, this policy has been around, and at least since I've known, I've been at the water board a little bit for a few years. But I'll go ahead and just read this verbatim since we're on record. I don't want to change anything. So standard process for turnoffs and removals due to failure to pay. The source is Sewage and Water Board's rules and regulations. Initial letters are sent to delinquent account holders when the account is determined to be 60 days past due and the balance is $50 or greater. To notify the customer the account is eligible for a service disconnection. Then when a multi-unit account becomes delinquent and no response is received from the customer, both the applicant for water, the customer of record, and the tenant or tenants will be notified before water service is discontinued, meaning they will receive a 10-day turn-off letter. If a 2-unit premise is served by one shared meter, both occupants are notified by postal mail letter, hard copy. And where subject premises involve the multiple use of sewer and or water service of 3 or more units on one shared meter, a notice is mailed by post to the customer of record, and a notice is posted on the building in various prominent locations at the same time the owner is provided the 10-day turn-off letter. And then tenants have the following options for recourse. Call SWBNO customer service to discuss the account status, even if they're not the account holder. If feasible, they have the option of paying for a single meter installation and opening an account in the tenant's name. And also they can attend hearings scheduled in regards to the account. That's really for all we have for the presentation. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that the multi-unit disconnect or shut-off policy is not a new policy, just hasn't really been implemented because of the moratoriums mostly, more than anything else. And also, just want to repeat what Gray said earlier, shutting anyone off is our last option. That's not something that we want to do. No one wins, no one benefits when anyone is shut off. We cannot bill if you're shut off, and you cannot enjoy water.
I think there are a couple of questions. First, Mr. Thomas, or comments. Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. The issue is here. I think we all understand the arrearages and what the Sewage and Water Board is owed. And I don't think anybody understands the neglect from multi-unit complexes and the people who operate them, whether it's not for profit or whether it's for profit or whether it's subsidized housing or apartments more than those of us who are in the elective office. But these multi-unit complex operators, you're not just shutting them off. When you shut them off, you're shutting off the families and the children and the seniors and the people who live in those complexes who've paid their rent. I know several complexes where people pay their rent. Water is included. Utilities are included in their rent. There has to be another step to this. And I'm familiar with other cities and other places. I know in Louisiana, the rights of a property owner, whether you're the most neglectful person in the world or not, is taken a lot more highly and critically at the state level. I wish they could free us from some of these state laws that have to deal with the rights of property owner. I was part of a council that got the redemption period cut from 3 years to 18 months. It's crazy. How are you doing people a favor to reduce the redemption period from 3 years to 18 months, when in many other states, it's a few weeks. You've already proven over years that you're neglectful in your property. So at some point, and I know our great state representatives and senators that are here with us continuously fight with us to do that. But I would hope that we would take a look at what some other folks do, is put their rent, use our city attorney's office to sue them to put the money in an escrow account. Period. If a multi-unit complex owner is neglectful, if they're operating blight, if they're not paying their bills, let's go to court so that those people who rent can pay into an escrow account. Maybe Sewage and Water Board could subtract its money there, but not at the end of the day affect the people who are paying their rent. So hopefully we can reconsider this. I know Councilmember King is not here. He represents an area where there are several multi-unit complexes. But to be honest with you, man, if you look at this city in renters, you're talking about, you think you got people under the overpayers. You think we have people under the bridge. You would create a situation that would require more government money to intervene than to actually get what you think is owed or from these neglectful landlords. It's the same thing the Corps of Engineers did. Engineers did. We asked for $1 billion for a Category 5 levy system. They gave us 600 million and said, pray for the rest, and it cost them $71 billion. This would have the same kind of ripple effect. If people were out on the street, the amount of services they would need, the amount of damage that would be done, the amount of health problems that would be issued. So please, let's all collectively get together. And especially because we have some great state officials who are here, who now that we have a working relationship with the experience of what Councilmember Burrell does and relationships at the state level. And I think the will of this council and community, let's reconsider this. Let's not penalize the people who are unintended, who ultimately will be penalized. Because guess what? These landlords still have their rent. They got paid and they don't live there. They're not going to get put out. So please, let's find another way and let's start to think about, especially for these bad landlords, how do we use the city attorney's office of the law to create some escrow accounts where they're not paying these people, they're paying into an account and they don't get their money until they fix the property or until they pay their utilities. Just a suggestion. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Representative Hilferty.
Thank you, Councilmember Morrell. My question was, the multifamily units, the 686 multifamily, I guess it's complexes, so it's individual, duplexes, triplexes, but also where you've got tens or maybe even 100+ units. Of those, are any of those under being contested, or any of those bills being contested, or has that all been established as owed?
No, I mean, this would be on accounts that are not disputed. If the account is under dispute, then we would not proceed with the turn off.
That would be in a different, okay. And then I guess my second question for this is, and I understand the plight of the renter who probably doesn't know any of this is going on. Do we know what other parishes in the state, how they handle this
Comment.
when they do have,
So I can't speak to other utilities in other parishes, but I can speak in regards to other utilities in other states because I've worked for other utilities in other states. And I think we at SWBNO are probably a bit more generous than other utilities in regards to how long we negotiate, the way we negotiate, the commitment that we have to impact tenants in just like the minimum way possible. Currently, there are a number of accounts that we have that we haven't disconnected precisely because of that, because we don't want to impact tenants. So like Councilmember Thomas said, whenever we can take a different route through legal proceedings or whatever it is, that's what we've done and that's what we're currently doing.
and I'll inquire with some of the other neighboring parishes to understand how, I don't think this problem is necessarily specific to New Orleans. And of this 686 past due accounts, is it spread over everything from a duplex to 100+ units in one development?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Druso.
Yeah, I think what we're all concerned about here is the fundamental fairness, which is sewage and water board needs to be paid for bills that are owed, but we shouldn't punish tenants who live in these buildings who are paying their rent. As sewage and water board, like other contractors, maybe have the ability to lien the building. So that way you can place a lien on the building itself, and then that satisfies till you get your judgment instead of shutting off the water, which runs the risk of punishing the tenants who've paid in good faith.
I think there's one instance where a commercial account that has been pursued, but it's not a common practice. So that type of legal step can be taken, then certainly I think we agree with the feedback here that would be an option. But to do so on a widespread basis for every single multifamily unit is quite an undertaking.
Because of the resources that sewage and water board has, because of the process. I mean, in other words, we have state legislators here And if we can create something that both balances tenants' right to, as Councilmember Thomas said, have paid, and at the same time punish owners who are scofflaws and make the process fair. And so, I mean, I don't even know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, there are some proceedings in court that are summary. They go much faster than something else. And again, I would have to ask the legislators about how that ultimately works. But to me, it seems like there has to be a legal mechanism that puts the onus on the owner that does not affect the tenants and then doesn't burden sewage and water board unduly. But think about it sort of like, you know, if the owner on a house stops paying the general contractor, right? Like they put a lien on the house as a result. So I mean, I'm thinking out loud here, I know, but I'm wondering if that's the direction we shouldn't be headed in.
Yeah, I mean, we asked that question too about a clear legal avenue that's easily accessible and can be done efficiently. But my understanding is currently, you know, that legislation is not existing.
Meaning that, and all that, that's certainly a path that we would support, having that option. I think it's something, I believe it's something that the SWBNO has tried to pursue, maybe not, you know, aggressively, because it would require probably legislative change and support, but something certainly that we would embrace.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other thing too is to make it worth sewage and water boards while if you are successful that you can recover attorney's fees too. I mean, there's so many limited things where you can't recover. Attorney's fees are only recoverable under Louisiana law for contracts or by statute. So if part of the problem is you're worried about getting paid, then I think if we can write this into the law, then that's another avenue to help the agency preserve resources where it's successful, and then also properly incentivize it so it's not overusing it either.
Yeah, and even if it wouldn't necessarily have to be sort of like blanket coverage, right? When it makes sense to do and pursue that avenue, at least if we have it as an option, then that'd be beneficial to property, all parties involved.
Councilman Green.
I would just like to add a comment without a solution, but shutting off water is an emergency, you know, for any home that has the water cut off. And I certainly understand the sewage and water board has to collect. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to provide services, and also there's an issue of fairness to those who pay their services. But I hope without necessarily me offering a solution and just adding to what council members Thomas and Jeruso have said, that somehow or the other there can be a pattern of being able to have an emergency immediately declared by the sewage and water board before they cut off waters to certain size complexes, I guess, if you will. And that honestly, the city or some fund pay that water and collect it from the owner. I can just imagine, and I understand what you have to do, but I can just imagine 400 unit complex water being turned off. It's not just the issue of the owner, it's obviously the issue of the children that live there, the elderly that live there. And we don't want to ever have a situation where water is turned off in any place, actually. But certainly I think that we also recognize that you can't look at every duplex and say that the city is going to take over the payments. But it's just food for thought with our state officials and city officials, which is why this committee is gathered together to put some thought processes in my opinion, on the emergency side, the emergency declaration, the potential of having resources available to pay that bill until the disposition is made, which includes maybe an emergency seizing of rents in certain instances when there is water that's going to be turned off right after the city begins making the payments on the water. Or if it were the sewage and water board, obviously an emergency option for them to be able to seize the rents, to be able to get it done right away before the water gets turned off. I don't usually say this 2 or 3 times, but I recognize that I like to offer solutions. I'm not offering a solution, but part of my solution is that it's an emergency. And I think that we can do extraordinary things, but maybe with the legislature's help, we could do things that make it clear that in certain instances, an emergency triggers payment may be being made by a governmental entity, but immediately seizing rents and making sure that those expenses which are paid by the taxpayers are covered.
I've got a couple of questions and ask some comments. I guess my first is on the multi-unit shut-off policy, it says that initial letters are sent to delinquent account holders when the account is determined to be 60 days past due and the balance is $50 or greater. What is the current trigger? I mean, obvious in the light of the economy and everything that's going on, being $60, 60 days past due on a $50 bill would seem pretty petty, but I'm assuming internally you've got some larger number that is a trigger, correct?
$50 is a trigger.
$50 with the trigger, okay. Next up, it says under your tenants have the following options for recourse. First, I'm really interested in this answer. If feasible, pay for a single meter installation and open an account in the tenant's name. So what does if feasible mean?
I can, I mean, the concept of the user or tenant can apply pressure or work with the owner of the property to replumb and change the current plumbing such that they could have their own account and take that responsibility. So it's a pressure that the user has a rental agreement with the owner to put pressure to correct the situation causing them harm.
And can I add something real quick? So if you think about, so multi-unit applies to any premise with more than one unit, right? So if you think about duplex or triplex quads, right, and one shared meter, it's pretty feasible that every tenant could get an individual meter. You talk about properties like 200, 300 units with maybe 5 or 6 shared meters, then that becomes pretty prohibitive, the cost, right? But if I'm a tenant and you're my landlord and I hire a plumber to give me an estimate and I'm willing to pay for it or convince you to do so, then that should be an option for every customer.
Well, I guess, do you know how much it costs to install a meter?
Well, it depends. I mean, it varies greatly.
I mean, a couple of things. First, I understand your definition of feasibility. It contemplates the landlord working with a tenant. From the way the presentation was done, you're only pursuing the strategy against absentee landlords who refuse to respond to the sewage and water board on an issue. If a landlord is unresponsive to the sewage and water board about paying the water bill, why would there ever be an assumption they would work with a tenant to resolve it separately in the building? Because I mean, I guess it defies logic that someone who knows that he has tenants that rely upon water and electricity, obviously, to function, that if they're ignoring their water bill, that suddenly they would be responsive to a tenant that's trying to work with them. Because obviously, I mean, one, I've had to build a house, so I've had a meter dropped. Having a meter dropped is thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about a multi-family unit water, multi-family unit where water can be shut off, and I mean, I'm sure Max will speak towards this, there are a tremendous amount of people there that are probably on Section 8 vouchers. And if you're on a voucher because you meet the income threshold to get one, where would you come up with the money to drop a meter? That doesn't seem feasible. So, I mean, I guess where you say, if feasible, pay for a single meter installation and open an account, you've got an unresponsive landlord, a ridiculously expensive meter you have to drop, and just from our property owner rights perspective, the amount of plumbing work that has to be done to create the meter and make it installed would require the consent of the owner of the building. So I would say that when you say tenants have the following options for recourse, number 2 should just draw an X right through that bad boy, because that's not happening. I mean, even if the tenant could afford to drop a meter, which is probably a very select few, because honestly, I would imagine in the properties where someone has $1,000+ of disposable income, those are probably condo units that aren't behind on their rent. And as far as being able to install it without the owner's consent, that's impossible because that's an infrastructure improvement on a building that no one can do to a property without the consent of the landlord. Also on the options for recourse. So you're saying a customer who doesn't have an account at Sewage and Water Board can call about the account status of someone else's account? Because that's what it says. It says call SWBNO customer service, discuss the account status, even though not the account holder.
Yeah.
That's something someone can do?
Yeah, that will give them the information to understand what the landlord has or has not paid, to have some information.
No, I get the process. What I'm saying is, can someone call Sewage and Water Board who is not an account holder and obtain information?
Yeah, these are rights directly from a legal case. So these are the legal rights of the users. So we're not selecting these or defining, we
Okay.
straight from legal.
So that's good then. So the,
Clarify, these are not just anyone, tenants who live in the premise.
okay, so once Sewage and Water Board has identified that a property is a multifamily property, as long as the tenant can prove they're a tenant in the property due to some previous legal guidance, you can provide information. Okay, so that one is
Correct.
feasible. Attend any hearing scheduled on the account. It seems like the tenant is only given notification when they get the 10-day turnoff letter. Is that correct? Based upon the multi-unit shut-off policy.
Correct.
So they would only be able to attend a hearing if there were a hearing after the meter were pulled feasibly.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. It can be before. It can be a hearing before the meter is pulled.
So well,
Most of the hearings occur before a meter is shut off.
so when do you have, in that 10-day period, when is the hearing scheduled to shut off the water?
When the customer reaches out, makes contact and requests a hearing.
Okay, so if, okay, that brings them, so if the landlord who's previously unresponsive remains unresponsive, there is no hearing.
Right.
Regardless if the tenant wants to attend one. Okay, so let's put a caveat on the third one. You can attend a hearing if the landlord who's unresponsive requests a hearing.
Mhm.
Okay, so the tenant cannot independently get a hearing to find out what's going on. All right, I guess I can already predict what's going to happen, and I hate to be Cassandra again. I know people are tired on the internet of me referencing Greek mythology repeatedly when I'm making conversation, but everyone can foresee what's about to happen. You are going to have a tremendous amount of tenants who either have rental agreements that include utilities, including water, or tenants who pay a fixed amount to a landlord for water. And when Sewage and Water Board pulls the meter off the building, you have tenants who are people who are not deadbeats, who are in good faith following the rules, who due to an unresponsive owner, many of which are LLCs or the like, or will not be materially compromised other than inconvenienced by the water being shut off, who will no longer have water. I mean, you foresee that as what's going to happen, right?
Most likely, yeah.
And so I guess when I look at stuff like this, I guess my mind is kind of boggled, because the end goal, I guess, in doing this is that by pulling the meter, you will shame a horrible, terrible property owner into doing the right thing.
Well, I'd say that by posting the letter, right, in very visible places, if it's a multi-unit over two, right?
I mean,
What it creates, because I've been a property owner too, and
Right.
I've had rentals and I've had meters and shared meters. And if you post a 10-day notice around the complex, what immediately is gonna happen is that tenants are gonna start not necessarily calling us, but they're gonna start calling the landlord.
it would also
They need to
depend,
rent too.
but with all due respect, it would depend on what day of the month you send the letter. Because if that landlord just got paid rent and you post a letter with 10 days notice, you have a tenant. First off, I completely believe you're a property owner. I know many responsible landlords. Those are not the type of people that would ever be in this predicament. The person who is not responded to sewage and water board on bills for months is not the kind of person that is going to be shamed by a letter. You're talking about hopefully not to be sued for so long. You're talking about a Josh Bruno kind of person, a person who really probably does little to no investment in his property to begin with. And because of the horrid state of the available of affordable housing, people put up with it. And I guess as we saw using the Josh Bruno example, we don't have enough affordable housing units currently for people with vouchers to get property. So when you pull the meter, that person who either has a voucher will not find other property to go to. So there are many people, and this, like I said, I'm not trying to beat Greek mythology to death, and I feel like I'm telling everybody what's going to happen and they should already foresee it. You're going to have a tremendous amount of tenants who are living in property with no water because they have nowhere else to go. Because simply put, there are not enough affordable housing units. If you've got a voucher, there's no one taking vouchers. And if you're paying the rent and it's a rent that's a feasible amount you can afford, the likelihood you find alternative property is nil. And if you get a 10-day letter on the 1st and you just paid rent, you don't even have next month's rent. So this is going to be a complete unmitigated train wreck. And I want Sewage and Water Board to acknowledge the fact that this is going to be an unmitigated train wreck, where if you have property owners that are this delinquent on Sewage and Water Board billing, they are not going to respond quickly to when the meters are pulled. And when they ultimately respond, you will have litigation that goes on for a couple of months, if years, where you'll reach a settlement where you'll get some amount of money. But in the interim between when that person ceases to respond and you pull that meter, to what Councilman Green said and what Councilman Thomas said, you're going to have a whole bunch of actual people that are actually materially injured by the predicament by no fault of their own whatsoever. And I think this is a tremendous problem. And I think, to be quite candid, when it comes to public utilities, and I'm not talking about Entergy, because Entergy is a privately run company. You're talking about a government utility. We have an additional obligation beyond protecting shareholders to protect the public. And even though we have a tremendous amount of outstanding obligations, accounts receivable, I will say, is it worth doing something like this to possibly recover? Let's use City of New Orleans Law Department numbers. Let's say, is it worth doing this to recover 10% of this money to lose a millage in 2027 because the public hates you? Because the difference between a privately funded corporation is, if the shareholders are happy, you can do unpopular things. If the public is unhappy and you're a public entity and they choose that they don't want to fund you anymore, they're going to do that when they vote. And I can tell you this proposal is going to go so badly, and it's so obvious it's going to go so badly, and it's going to generate so much ill will. I don't know what the 2027 bond proposal is worth, but it's probably worth more than $4 million. And is it worth flexing on landlords who don't care to begin with to do irreparable damage to the reputation of an organization to the point where the people of the city despise you? That's just my point. I will say that the reason why we request this presentation to be done is, to be clear, the water shutoffs are tied to billing, and this committee has exclusive jurisdiction over billing. We are not at a point, because the policy has not been implemented and we haven't seen the blowback from it, but this is something this committee can revisit at a future date. I just feel like I said, this is gonna end very, very, very badly. Representative Hilferty.
Thank you, Councilman Morel. I guess my question was, Councilman Jeruso had referenced putting a lien on the property. Is that currently done by Sewage and Water Board to lien properties that are delinquent?
No, not in any. I only heard one example, but not commonly.
Yeah, not in a structured, we don't have a structured go-to process for that.
Could you create a process? Because that would get to the person who actually owes it while leaving the tenants out of the equation.
Yeah, we can certainly go back and check in with our legal department to see what, the requirements would be. Absolutely.
Okay, I would encourage Sewage and Water Board to do that, because that might be the way of getting to the heart of the problem, which is a landlord who is not contesting the bill, but also not paying the bill. And presumably those tenants are paying their rent, they're paying their portion of the water. So allow them to continue that service while putting the lien on the property for past due water bills. Thank you.
Just want to take a quick minute, and I don't know if Greg has anything to add, but again, just want to remind everyone that this is not a new proposal. This is not a new policy. Okay, this policy has been around for years. That's the policy that has been in the process that's been followed for years on end, right? So at some point, I mean, it's a very complex topic. We completely acknowledge and understand the impact to customers, especially to tenants who have, been good tenants, good citizens, good neighbors, and that out of no fault of their own, their landlord's decision is going to have a direct and significant impact on their lives, right? So we do not take that for granted at all. And again, that's our option of last resort. But at some point, we have to be mindful that in a publicly owned utility, like Council Member Morel said, anything that is not paid by one is subsidized by the rest, right? So, and Council Member Jeruso mentioned it too. At some point, those who do pay, even landlords, right, or regular Joes like you and I, are going to bear the cost of those people that get away with not paying. So I know it's a very complex topic, and there's societal impacts to any of these things, but again, this policy is not a new policy, and it's not like we're pulling a trigger and going after everyone. I mean, if we had the opportunity to share, and we're happy to do so, the leaps and bounds we've taken with some of the bigger complexes that we're already prepared to take action on. I mean, we've been as generous as you can be, without ignoring again the fact that someone is going to subsidize any of this, and any money not reclaimed is going to be money that is not directed again towards infrastructural capital improvement projects that at some point are going to impact the rest of our customer base.
Max? Oh, your butt, sorry. your butt.
Yeah, sorry, Max, I'll be very, very quick. Please come forward. I just guess I'm looking at the bottom number, which is $31 million, $32 million. The accounts receivable is $150 million. And I just think we can focus on other things in addition to this going forward. And I guess I'm just a little worried about pursuing these multifamily tenants without going through a lien process. And I understand what you're saying, that it's like an insurance pool. Everybody bears a burden for people who drive up the costs. But at the same time, I'm really, really worried about punishing tenants too. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Maxwell.
Thank you, council members and state reps and senators. Really appreciate you bringing this conversation today. Maxwell Chardula, I'm the Director of Policy and Communications with the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center. Part of the reason we're here is because we help run the city's Right to Counsel program. So when tenants are evicted, they come to us. And I think we should just be clear about this. Shutting off someone's water is a constructive eviction. If you're a landlord and you shut off your tenant's water without going to court and evicting them, that's illegal and you can be penalized under state law. And so this amounts to the city evicting tenants for something that they didn't do. And so, you know, I appreciate you, Councilmember Morel, making clear that notice is not good enough here. And just to drive home the point about the idea of putting your own meter and being totally unavailable to tenants, 2/3 of all renters in the city qualify for Section 8 vouchers. 2/3. Not 2/3 of them don't receive them, right? Because we don't ever have enough vouchers to go around. But 1/4 of all renters in this city are Section 8 tenants or tenants to the housing authority. So the idea that someone in a building with a landlord who is delinquent and isn't paying their bills is somehow going to be able to take care of themselves is just a joke. The idea that they're going to have any sort of money to find a new place to live is a joke. This actually happened to me in 2013. My landlord stopped paying the water bill and I left because I had the resources to do it. I didn't get notice. You know, that was a different sewage and water board, but most tenants are not. They're not going to be able to leave. This is just going to be, like I said, a constructive eviction. And so, you know, I don't have to remind you all, but when the city closed the Oakmont apartments, they evacuated the remaining tenants. They provided hotel vouchers. They put people up, helped them find housing assistance. They helped them move their stuff. Because they realized that if you're going to shut down an entire apartment building, you have to provide some sort of resources to those folks so that they don't end up on the street. And, you know, we actually created a fund just for that purpose last year, the anti-displacement fund. It does not have any money in it, but if you're going to move forward with this sort of a policy, and I realize there's different entities here, right? The city, the council, the sewage and water board. But from the perspective of the tenant, it doesn't matter. It is a public entity that's kicking them out of their home and shutting off their water. And we have a responsibility that if you're going to move forward with that, you have to take care of those folks and make sure they have a place to go.
Max, before you go, do you know offhand how much the city spent relocating the Oakmont tenants? Just a ballpark.
Millions.
I guess
It would be a question for the Office of Community Development. They ran that, but it was millions.
it was millions of dollars. So
More than 4 million. I can
more
tell
than
you
4
that.
million. So if you had 3 200-person multifamily units that were closed, how much would it cost the city to relocate all those people if we constructively evicted them by turning off the water?
I mean, you could put the rest of the American Rescue Plan money towards that alone. It would be a serious problem.
And I guess part of the issue is that when you're making policy like this, it's important not to do it in a vacuum because there's practical implications. And to your point, and I'm sure that fair housing as well as tenant council will make this argument, what responsibility do we have as a city to individuals who, let's say, paid their water bill in their rent or rented an apartment because water was inclusive and they've paid their rent every single month? And when that utility is cut off because the landlord did not remit the payment, I would imagine that that could lead to a tremendous amount of litigation that would include both the landlord and the utility.
I mean, I think as the agencies who try and defend tenants against these sort of things, we are under obligation to do everything possible to try and stop it.
Okay, thank you, Max. Anyone else have any questions for Max? No. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Mr. Morgan.
I'm Larry Morgan of New Orleans. I represent southeast and west of Nolan. Greeting to your councils. It's good to see you all. It is reality what I heard and address from the young man that the tenant pays their rent and the landlord responsibility is to keep the water running because the water is in combined with the rent. But the point is this. Many of them come to me and show me, say, Mr. Morgan, look across the street, they're turning our water off. I said, did you pay your rent? Yes. Some of them I have to lend them money to pay their water bill and that. But this is the point that those landlord, a percentage of them, you understand? They neglect of paying the water bill and they expect the tenants to come up with extra money, which is wrong because the reason is the water is combined with the rent. And when those tenants pay their rent, they should have access to the water for what they paid for. And also, I want to address to you also another scenario. Through the water board, they get very angry. The service is poor. When they call them up on the phone, they on hold, on hold, on hold, on hold. The next minute, you know, somebody else come on. Next minute, you know, the line go dead. You understand? They don't have too much of a good relationship with their customer in time of crisis when help is needed. Also, I want to address that many of those people, them same people, say, Mr. Morgan, something got to be done about those water bills. I have a lady, I couldn't believe it. She showed me the amount of water that she uses, and I couldn't believe what her bill was. But now I wanted, if you notice on that sheet, you see where I request another scenario. And this is a scenario I'm going to address. I went to the meeting of New Orleans theme park development. And I sit there and I watched it, all those screens of every project that is going to generate millions of dollars to where I couldn't keep up with the figure. But this is what I'm coming to the point of. One time, the city was talking about buying sewage water board out. Okay. It can become reality. When I seen how big that park is and how much money that the city is going to generate, that is the city opportunity to buy sewage water board out because the money will be there from the revenue that that park is going to generate. That would be something that should be taken into consideration for the future and also put
Mr. Morgan,
upon
can
the
you
ballot.
wrap up for me? Thank you.
Understand? As also that what really bothers me in the mind is this. Why did they pick New Orleans East? That's where the storms come in from Pearl River. Think about what I said. That's where one more scenario Ms. Johnson asked me to request. She requested that no one council should govern a theme park. She said, Mr. Morgan, it must be geographic of all the representative of our city. It's too much responsibility for one person. She addressed it to me. She said, look at Justice Perry. They all work together and all decisions come under the council. The people are going to request that the council as a whole of every district in New Orleans come together and work for the unity and work for the city as one to come to decision of every decision concerning that theme park should come to the body of the whole council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. All right, that clears our questions on that item. Seeing no other questions or comments, we will go to item number 4, which is ordinance number 34-113, which is before this committee today. This is an ordinance to give some clarification to the previous ordinance that was done last year. Ms. Spears, can you go over the changes proposed in ordinance 34-113?
Sure. So the ordinance as introduced makes a few changes to the existing code provisions, as you mentioned, Councilmember Morel. First, it raises the number of consecutive billing cycles from 2 to 3 before Sewage and Water Board forfeits its right to collect. It institutes a notice of meter reading that came out of the joint Public Works Utilities meeting a couple of weeks ago. It institutes an automatic offering of deferred payment arrangements for customers whose bills are 20% higher than their last actual, and allows for repayment under that arrangement for 2 to 24 billing cycles, so 2 months to 2 years. It solidifies Curo's review of appeals for timeliness and completeness as part of the council appeals process, and institutes deadlines for enforcement of judgments from the administrative hearing officer and the city council's final decision on appeals. Those are the high points of the ordinance as introduced. I believe Sewage and Water Board has some proposed amendments that are before you in a red line document.
If Sewage and Water would like to present those amendments.
Is this where we, and this is just me asking, where we can make a motion to adopt our amendments and ask you to read them into the record?
So procedurally, I think it's best to have a discussion of the amendments. So you may want to walk through each proposed amendment. And then it would be up to the committee member and of course the chair on whether or not to entertain a motion for all of the amendments in part, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think the way I would approach this is you can explain your proposed amendments. And then you can, as a committee member, you can offer a motion to, I guess it would be considered to amend the ordinance, right, Aaron? To amend
Yes,
ordinance
sir.
number 34-113. After reading your amendments, then the committee would have to consider whether or not to go along with the amendments as you propose them.
Thank you.
So whenever you're ready.
So we explain our recommendations. Yeah. Okay, so the first is related to section 159.3 under billing. SWBNO shall bill its customers monthly pursuant to established billing cycles. Should SWBNO fail to bill customers for 3 or more consecutive billing cycles, SWBNO thereby forfeits its right to collect payment on those billing cycles. And what we're proposing is changing it, reducing it from, increasing it from 3 to 6, right, Greg? And then adding the verbiage. Should SWBNO fail to bill customers for 6 or more consecutive billing cycles, SWBNO thereby forfeits its right to collect payment for those billing cycles in a lump sum amount and will be required to provide up to 24 months for an optional payment plan with no interest or fees due from the customer.
Do you want to go through each amendment and vote on each amendment, or do you want to do all of them in globo? It's up to you.
I guess we can do all of them and then have conversation at the end. If that's fine with you.
It's your amendment, so like I said, you can either read each one, have a vote, or you can go over each one and we can vote as a group.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go through all of them.
Okay.
and vote at the end. Okay, if I skip anything, let me know.
I think what Representative Hilfrey is proposing is it would be most efficient if you just read all the amendments in a row at once, like say, for example, 59.3 billing A, we propose this, 59.3 B. Yeah, the rationale as to why you're gonna do why. Right.
Okay, absolutely. Where you want to talk about the one I just read, just the rationale behind it? 3 to 6.
Yeah, this is consistent with the Entergy 6 months, and most importantly, we talk about a policy for customers to have up to 180 days to report a high consumption bill. So consistent with the earlier discussion about affording the equal amount of time for a customer to raise a high bill for an investigation, that this would align that timeline for failure to bill, which we already have, a strong incentive to bill much sooner than this, but again, aligning those two times and then consistent with the Entergy 6 months.
Thanks, Ray. And then next one is section 1593, billing B. And on that one, this is the comment that I have. If we were to leave a notice every time a meter is read, we read a minimum of 70,000 meters every month with our new meter reading strategy. If it took a meter reader between 1 or 2 minutes to finish reading, take the reading, leave a note on the door or whatever it might be, if it takes 1 or 2 minutes for him or her to do that, and we read 70,000 meters a month, that translates to over 2,300 hours, which equals 17 additional staff, which I understand the intent or the spirit of this, but the lack of staff basically is what's gotten us to where we are today. And it's just, we're unable to do this.
Can the date and time of the reading be included on their bill?
I can check. mean-
Because you've got a record of it. I'm assuming they're doing it through some sort of phone
Yeah.
or is it?
Yeah, so
I think
it's a handheld
and you weren't here for the previous meeting, Representative Hilferty. The issue was we were attempting in that meeting during that conversation to say, we get notice in the form of the bill saying we do a meter reading every month. Part of the complaint we get from individuals, they go, well, there's no proof anyone actually read our meter. If you simply say, we'll provide a date, let's not providing proof someone physically was on the property. The idea was that sort of like how when someone comes to read or interacts with your property, they hang a door hanger saying, hey, I read your meter today. What that would do for people who are complaining that or doubting their meter was read every day,
Gotcha.
you would have some kind of physical thing showing a physical person showed up and read the meter. So I understand what the amendment is, but I was trying to give you the color as to why it was put that way.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's our rationale for our counter proposal.
There's a change to E too. There's some language.
Well, that's right. 159.3 is what we just read now, previously.
Yeah, I could read that for 159-4, little letter A insertion.
No, I think
Sorry, there's an
you have-
amendment
you have
to
a
159-3.
E as in
Okay.
enigma. You have an amendment there
Sorry.
as well.
Yes. That inserts the word and the customer requests additional payment options for additional deferred payment. The rationale there is, we're financially not in a position to offer deferred payment. We do work with customers that are in a need and having trouble paying, but to make some type of automatic offer is financially detrimental and not really serving a service because there's another bill coming the following month. So we believe this additional language is more consistent with the spirit of helping people if they're in need and asking. And also changing 24 to 12, which is, again, these are time periods that we currently do this with customers on a need base, but to go to an outer number, have an outer number posted here is a financial strain and burden. So we would reduce that from 24 to 12. I'll read 159-4A is inserting the additional language that spoke to earlier that customer initiated bill within 100 days, 180 days of the bill date to allow that reasonable window for a customer to report a high consumption bill to us. Pick up here, 159-.
For 159.5.2. We're adding language to consider along other relevant facts obtained during the investigation, whether there is a need to inspect and or assess the customer's water meter. In which event SWBNO shall notify the customer 7 days in advance of the date and time of such inspection and assessment. And deleted that the customer has the right to refuse the inspection. If we don't have an inspection, we cannot complete an investigation.
Adding an additional date. Next one is a. Sorry.
Yes, on that amendment. Says consider along with other relevant facts obtained during the investigation, whether there is a need to, what are other relevant facts? What would that include?
So just monthly consumption, any leak history, payment history, any spikes in consumption, whether up or down. The idea here is that if we say if a customer's bill is over 20% and that automatically triggers a truck roll, then we're gonna have probably hundreds or thousands of truck rolls a day, which we cannot do. 20% of a bill that averages $150, for example, is $180. So an addition of $30 is not uncommon, right? So we're adding that along with other relevant facts. For example, if your bill is 120 and it goes to 100 and let's say it doubles, but you didn't pay last month, right? Then that shouldn't generate an automatic truck roll. So there's a number of scenarios, numerous scenarios that we can talk about that sort of like defeat the purpose. I understand the spirit and the intent of this. So if we are able to modify that language, I think it benefits everyone involved.
Next one is 159-5. It adds after number 4, an additional number 5, which would define a date after appeal to council. So once final council action is taken under the section, will be transmitted to SWBNO in writing within 15 calendar days. So we would have that final decision and record in our possession. The last two are 159-6. This is a change to the number. It's consistent with the earlier comments that I made to not have a 24-month deferred payment arrangement, be some automatic outer range. The 12 is more appropriate if the customer requests additional payment options, which is much more consistent with current practice in the financial constraints that we have as an agency. Under 159-6, two wording adjustments where we're striking hearing and replacing it with judgment in line 65 and 66. And then at the end of section 3, same change I mentioned earlier, modifying the number 24 down to 12. And again, if the customer requests additional payment options. And those are the suggested amendments.
Okay, Councilman Druso has a comment on those amendments.
Yeah, this is more a general comment. Number one, my colleagues know that I don't generally like suspending the rules because I think that's bad practice. Number two, they know that I don't really like resolutions. And now I'm going to add my third one, which is amendments received less than 48 hours before we're voting on things. And this goes for committees and for council. I just, we spent a lot of time reading these things into it. Nobody has discussed this with us. And I'm just going to kind of make a general practice that unless there's good reason to kind of be a no, and even that goes for my colleagues too. It makes it too. Yes, the Councilmember Morel just said I'm consistently difficult. True. And I'm going to be predictable when it comes to this. So thank you.
All right, there's no further questions at this time. If you'd like, either of y'all could move to adopt the amendments. And then you need a second, and then we'll vote our machines. So that would be on your,
So moved.
all right, press your button on there, which says motion to adopt as the mover. And then you need a second, so someone have the second. All right, first we vote your machines. That is three nays, two yays. The amendment fails.
Senator Harris.
Those machines lit up. Oh, it's not up. All right, 4 nays, 2 yays. The amendment fails. Aaron, I'd like to offer up another amendment. That amendment would be to adopt the changes proposed for 159.4 C5 lines 49 and 50, which add the language that state on final council actions taken under this section will be transmitted to SWBNO in writing within 15 calendar days. I'd also like to add 159.6 part 2 lines 65 and 66, which change hearing date to judgment date. I'll offer up those amendments. Can I get a second? Seconded by Representative Hilferty. Please vote your machines. All right, we have 4 yeas, 1 nay. The amendments are adopted. All right, now up, we have, I will move to adopt or move forward on ordinance calendar 34-113. Take a second. Second, Councilmember Druso, please vote your machines. Four yeas, 2 nays. The ordinance will be forwarded to the full council. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That completes
Council
our.
member, this is actually going to committee.
Well, that's all right, to committee. I apologize. We'll go to committee. That completes our items for the day. Councilman Druso moves, we adjourn. Senator Harris seconds the motion to adjourn. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.